I say bright and sunny Monday morning in early June, and I'm here with Matt Ellison, and we're talking about trans inclusion post for Women Scotland UK Supreme Court ruling. Um, the, the topic on most people's minds, well, actually, probably not. It's probably only on the minds of people who are trans or gender diverse. So, but it's a topic that occupies a lot of conversations. And I met with Matt a couple of weeks ago, and we had a bit of we were going to do a podcast, and we ended up spending an hour and a half just chatting without going live. And we decided it'd be nice to resurrect that conversation and talk about it to you, to people who are listening today, and maybe go into the detail. Because Matt, do you want to explain who you are first? I don't want to out you or anything.
Yeah, so I can out myself. Okay, so yeah, I'm Matt, and I am a trans man, which means I was born physically female, and I've transitioned to bring my body in line with how I've always been, always male inside. And I'm a public speaker, so I speak about that. And we met actually quite a few years ago, didn't we? Because we were both doing the same event. And so yeah,
We
we've known each
did,
other for a while now.
we did, didn't we? And
Mm.
um, yeah, it was. I don't know. It was one of those sort of fortuitous meetings where we got to know each other, and what we realised that we've come at this from 180 degrees apart. You're heading in one
Yeah,
direction, I'm heading in the
yeah,
direction you just come from. And there's so much in common with the way we think, our insecurities, our imposter syndrome. And I, for having chatted to you the other week, I realized that I was so caught up in how bad it was for me. I just thought, oh, trans man, take testosterone, grow a beard, lose your hair, get muscles. What's the problem?
yeah.
But it's not that easy, is it?
No, no. That's what actually I found right from our early conversations is interesting, because there's a few things that I've sort of felt neither side, if you like, can say, sort of feel nervous to say certain things, and you and I have had like quite open conversations about that, and you think, oh, okay, so it almost means, yeah, it is okay to say that, and all our thoughts are valid, but it's almost, we were a bit nervous because trans men don't want to upset trans women and vice versa. So I think our conversations have been eye-opening and really interesting.
Yeah. Raw. Yeah,
Yeah,
really raw,
yeah,
authentic.
yeah.
Um, I learned some things about you, and I'm sure we're going to cover them in the course of this hour.
Mm.
And uh, obviously, we're encouraging people to put stuff in the chat. I've got LinkedIn open. I can see the conversation coming in there. I've got the YouTube open, so I can see conversations coming in here. If you want to join us on Riverside, again, the links are in LinkedIn for that. So come and join us, contribute, ask questions. Absolutely fine. All I ask is that there's a modicum of respect. We are human beings. We are real people. We will go most places, I'm sure, within those bounds of decency. As I often say to my audience, I'm happy to talk about anything above the shoulders. Below the shoulders is mine. Above the shoulders is yours. So happy to talk about that. So yeah, keep that respectful. Although you and I may well dive beneath the
Yeah.
shoulders up from time to
A
time,
little
just
bit, yeah.
just for the just to go into that. So how did you feel on the 16th of April
Oh,
at about 10:30 in the morning? What was going through your head?
I literally, I felt like my world had collapsed, because, and that, I know that sounds really dramatic, but when I talk about change in my talks, to me, I think there's two distinct, we know nothing's binary, but if you had to split it, there's two main types of change. So there's change that we have to deal with that's thrown at us, and that tends to be quite negative. And you get speakers out there that have dealt with massive adversity through accidents, illnesses, loss of loved ones, etc. Um, terrorist attacks, whatever it is. And it's amazing how, the courage that and the inspiration that they can give us from that. But I think my journey, or our journey, is different, because we've actually made a positive change and improved our lives, but it took courage, because it wasn't thrown at us. It wasn't something that we just had to deal with. We could just pretend and sweep it under the carpet and not be our true authentic selves, and just blend into society. So for me, coming out and having that courage has always been an amazing story, where all of a sudden this weight that was just horrible, trying to live this life with a million and one things that people just do not understand, that we face day in day out because they haven't had to face it, all of a sudden that's lifted, and it's like, wow, I'm now Matt. And it's absolutely amazing. And that's always been my story, is how good life can be. And I can honestly say that all of this that's happened, this is the first time to do with any of this that I've gone backwards, and that I've had something negative that's out of my control thrown on me, that's just kind of like turned my world upside down and become a really negative. Because yeah, I spent, and I'm sure you've had issues with toilets, throughout the process at different stages that changes through transition. But I had so many issues because I looked quite masculine before, and with going into female spaces, which is where I belonged and where I was supposed to be, supposedly as a woman, and now as a man, never once been looked at, never once been stared at. It took a heck of a lot of courage to walk into a gents for the first time, but when I did, wow, okay, complete difference. There's still issues, there's still problems, but life is better. And all of a sudden now, that's all come back. It's all been thrown back at me, and it's not just one little thing. It's not just saying, oh, we need to use a different toilet. It's actually a huge problem emotionally that I've been dealing with for years. That has huge weight to it for me, and for most trans people. So yeah, it was huge. So you know, how about you? What was your experience?
Yeah, I mean, great question. And I've written some blog articles about this and some LinkedIn posts. And the phrase I use, I feel like I lost my citizenship.
Yeah.
I feel like I've been deported. I feel that the promise that I was given by our government, because I was promised, I had to swear a statutory declaration in front of a solicitor, pay my £5. My wife did as well. We both stood in front of the solicitor, swore a declaration renouncing my masculinity and embracing my femininity from this point forward for the rest of my life. That's what the government wanted me to do. That's the deal that I had with the government. Government told me to get this bit of paper, to get a new birth certificate, I must renounce my gender, my birth gender, which I did willingly. I embraced it. I then got a huge wad of paper documentation telling me about all this rules and all that rules and what I had to do, what I was allowed to do, what I wasn't allowed to do, how I had to behave. I mean, literally, I read it and thought, wow, this is serious. And a certificate with my name on it, and it said gender. I then get a phone call from the passport office or the registrar's office a few months later saying, we just want to check what you want on your birth certificate. We're going to send you a proof. And then suddenly the birth certificate arrives. And there it says girl and Joanne on it. So that was the deal I thought I had. And actually, the weekend when I was looking at this, just preparing for today, I found this web page, and I'm going to show. I'm going to pop up the screen now. I'm going to share it now, just to highlight. This was the contract that I believed I had with the government. So this website, as you can see at the top here, is legislation.co.uk. This is the place where civil servants and other people go to check about legislation, to ask questions, to look at comments, to look at things. And this is about the Gender Recognition Act 2004. And lots of it, but subsection 1 in section 9 here, let me just highlight this for you. So this says the fundamental proposition is that once full gender recognition certificate is issued to the applicant, the fundamental proposition, this is a proposal, this is what it's saying, I'm expecting, this is the deal I have, okay? That the person's gender becomes for all purposes the acquired gender. All purposes the acquired gender. Yes, there are some exceptions in the Equality Act 2010, and I respect for those. So the applicant who was born male would in law become a woman for all purposes. Yeah, for all purposes in law. And then she would, for example, so even giving an example here, be entitled to protection as a woman under the Sex Discrimination Act 1975. Obviously, the Gender Recognition Act was 2004, before the Equality Act 2010. But there's no lack of clarity here. There's no ambiguity
Mm,
here. This is in writing on the government website, and this is the contract. This is the deal I took out with the government, and you did, and others did.
mm.
At that time, when we filled that bit of paper, we supplied all of that evidence. We swore our statutory declaration. This is how we believed our government were going to treat us under the law. So that's the contract as far as I'm concerned. That's what's now been stolen, for want of a better
Yeah.
way. I say loss of citizenship. that has been revoked in retrospect. And I think it's really disingenuous to hear people say, we never had these rights.
Yeah.
We've overstepped the mark. This is something you should never have had. You were never entitled. We've rewritten the law. No, we haven't actually. What they're saying is we haven't rewritten the law. We've just clarified what the law always said. I maintain it is not what the law always said. This page, legislation.gov.uk, quite categorically said this was the intent the lawmakers, the legislators, Parliament committed to on the enactment, if you like, of the Gender Recognition Act 2004. That's how I feel cheated, disenfranchised, loss of citizenship. And that's kind of how I feel. And I'm now powerless, as you are, as we all are. There's no recourse.
Mm.
When the highest appeal court in the land rules, how do you appeal the highest appeal? And I appreciate you can't keep going backwards and forwards and arguing tit for tat all the time. There has to be some finality. But we're also in a situation now, as you're aware, is our government, for whatever reason, aren't willing to engage. The Equality and Human Rights Commission themselves, who should be there as the arbitrators
Yeah.
in these
On our
situations,
side. Yeah.
are marginalising us even further and reinforcing this rhetoric that we were never entitled. But one of their KCs came out, was it the weekend or end of last
That's
week,
what I wanted to speak about. Yeah.
saying that we'd asked for too much. Yeah,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
obviously read that. You carry on
Yeah.
that.
That was actually not in her capacity as commissioner, was it? That was a personal capacity.
Personal, yes.
Yeah. But yeah, it's to me, everything that's happened is contradicting other things. So it doesn't add up. It just does not make sense in so many different ways. And even this person's comment, I can't pronounce her name, but just contradicts everything. So, like as you said, saying we weren't entitled to these rights, but you've just brought it up on the government website saying that we were. So, or not were, but that we are. But then also, one of the things that that really gets me is she's then talking about whether you have a gender recognition certificate or not, and basically saying if you do, then you have these protections, and if you don't, then you don't. But actually, this Supreme Court ruling is saying it doesn't make any difference whether you have one or not. It's exactly the same. So, and this is the commissioner of the EHRC, and nothing they're saying is making sense. So there's no clarity. Then I know I'm baffled as to how people can't see the logic behind how all this is just wrong. Because going to the gendered spaces debate, if you go back many years to when black people weren't allowed in certain spaces or on the bus. I can't remember the name of the lady that kind of like went against all that to try and change things and actually
Rosa
stood
Parks.
on the bus.
Rosa Parks, yeah.
Yeah. We are now equivalent to those people of color, because if you said to someone, oh, women's spaces need to be safe, so we can't let black people in a toilet. Nowadays, people go, but you can't say that. Black people aren't dangerous. And that's exactly what they're saying about us. Yeah, women need to be safe. We're not eroding their rights. Of course they need to be safe. But are trans people unsafe? That's what you're saying. And, so it just doesn't make any sense. It's just transphobic. But people think they're not being transphobic by saying, well, of course you can't let men in women's spaces. But actually what they need to recognize is that trans men are men and trans women are women. So it's not letting men in women's spaces. It's just, and it's not making them unsafe. I was stood, actually, we went to the pictures recently, and I stood in the car park paying for the parking, and there was a woman in front of us at the machine, me and Jeff, my partner Jeff, who's male, and we stood there. We're the only three people in this particular area on, next to a car park on these, where the stairs are on the level for our car park. And I'm stood there waiting for her to buy a ticket. And I'm thinking, does this woman feel threatened by the fact there's two men behind her? Absolutely not. We're the only people there. So why would that, if you were in a different situation, why would anybody feel threatened by someone else's presence just because it's a toilet? So it doesn't matter whether, if you're in a female toilet, whether that's a woman behind you or a man behind you or a trans man or a trans woman or whatever, that's not what makes anybody dangerous. So why are trans people being told you can't go into a toilet when actually if women feel threatened, they need to change and do something so that it makes them feel safe with the people that are threatening them, which isn't trans people. It just, none of it makes any sense, and it's just our rights are going, and we can't live our lives normally. And it's huge for us because it's all these things are big. This is something I talk about when people don't realize how small things make a massive difference. Because someone says, oh, it's a word, it's only a word. If they use our dead name or use the wrong pronouns. So yeah, to the people using it, it's only a word. So it doesn't matter to them. But for us, it's a reminder of all the issues and the problems that we've had to deal with in our lives. And it's huge. So imagine if that's just words, what does toilet spaces and just being told we're not who we think we are? It's just, yeah.
So we mentioned this KC, the commissioner of the EHRC,
Sorry, I went off. Yeah.
and in the article though, it quite clearly said this was their personal opinion and
Yeah.
didn't reflect the views of the EHRC. Is that a fair separation? I mean, I
No.
was at a police
No.
conference last week, on the week before last, and I was on a table. We're doing a little workshop around this table, and one of the officers on that table was a senior force member. I'm not sure what rank, chief inspector, who had lots of crowns and stuff on shoulder,
Mhm.
and said this example was about an off-duty police officer causing a trouble in a bar and being thrown out, etc., etc. And this senior police officer said that police officer can be held accountable for misconduct whilst holding public office.
Yeah.
So a police officer is never off duty. They're always a
Mm.
police officer.
Yeah.
They're always held to that highest esteem as a police officer.
Yeah.
Therefore, this KC, regardless of whether they're EHRC commissioner, they're a King's counsellor, they have a status that they have to uphold the law, and also their opinions do matter because it shows their
Yeah.
bias and their
Yeah.
personal interests. So I don't believe you can separate a
No.
personal opinion from this public role. And I
No.
think whoever tried to defend that is showing that they're trying to cover that up.
Yeah. But not only that, if if this is their, they can state their personal opinions, but if that's how they truly feel, then in their role in the EHRC, they're still going to have those opinions. And so that's when I think they are involved with rewriting some of this guidance. So that's what's going to be thrown into the guidance, isn't it? And
Mm.
it scares me. I've seen a lot of debates in Parliament where people are, lots of the politicians and MPs are saying certain things, and I think it's really, really scary. It's a scary time for us. How many people are just not on our side? And to
So
me,
let me
it's
just
not.
reinforce.
Yeah.
Let me reinforce the reality and the gravity of the
Mm,
Gender Recognition Act. Yeah, this is not confetti. This is not sweeties that we're handing out.
yeah.
Okay, this is my new birth certificate. Yeah, this is the birth certificate I was issued. And let me I'm not going to show you the whole thing, but let me there it says, yeah, they do not hand these out willy-nilly. These
No.
aren't handed out
Yeah.
um, for a fetish. These aren't handed out for a joke. These aren't handed out to pander to my ideology. This is a legal document that each and every one of us is bestowed on with our citizenship when we're born. That is what I have. And that is what I'm being told is no longer valid. And the only way I can prove myself now is a cheek swab and a chromosome test,
Mm,
which will identify me as having a Y chromosome, which means that regardless of what I've contracted with the government, whatever the government promised me is no longer valid.
mm,
And that's not an ideology. That's a breach of contract, as far as I'm concerned.
yeah. Yeah. But there's just so much wrong with everything, with all of it, because part of getting the new birth certificate is to give us anonymity. So
Mm.
I know and I still feel uncomfortable because I feel like I'm lying, but I know that I have a right to do this. If I open a bank account and it says, have you been known by any other names, the paper trail goes back to Matthew as my name, as my birth name. So I write no, and in fact, if I put yes, it would really confuse everyone, because they'd be like, well, what's this extra? You haven't got another name. You've never had another name. And the reason that they do that is because without that, we can't have anonymity, and we've got a right to have anonymity, whether that's just a paper trail on with our records or bank accounts, mobile phone contracts, etc., or whether that's in person, which is also to do with safety. So how on earth can I have complete anonymity if, when I go to a place of work or a gym or whatever, and they go, no, you can't go in the gents' toilets? It no one knows I'm trans. I've passed 100% as male, never ever been gendered female once since January 2014. I started hormones in October 2013. So how it just, like you say, you'd have to have a chromosome test or something to, no one can see that. It just,
No.
it really
Or
doesn't
is
make
that what you want? I mean, I
any
felt,
sense.
we were joking just before we went live, and I said, "What is the real issue here?" And I'm gonna use the word penis. If you're uncomfortable hearing that word, because a lot of people use that word, they band it around.
Yeah,
Is that the issue? You don't know if I've got a penis or not. Is that
yeah,
what scares you? Yeah, if you've
yeah,
got a penis, then you're a threat. If you haven't got a
yeah,
penis, then you're not a threat. Is that
yeah,
is that is that what you're fixated about? Yeah, everyone seems to be fixated about these these
yeah,
these appendages as being, we don't want that in our space. And yeah, I get it. I don't want to be walking around seeing a penis in my space either.
yeah,
It's let's
exactly.
get real here. It's like, I mean, I appreciate you do.
Yeah,
I don't.
yeah,
Well, not outside the bedroom anyway. But the issue here is people are getting transfixed around.
yeah,
It's yeah, completely. I said earlier, it's above the shoulders, and
yeah,
who I am, what's on my birth certificate, is above the shoulders. It's got nothing to do
yeah,
with below the waist. And I don't know about you. I've been taking testosterone suppressors and blockers for the best part of 10 years,
mm,
and I've been taking estrogen for the best part of 10 years as well. So I'm definitely my if you did a blood test on me, you would never you I would pass better than an athlete, because my testosterone, I think, is point 0.4. I think the most athletes,
mm,
most female range is about point 0.1, point 0.2 or something like this, or 1 or 2. So my rates are really low. So I don't run on testosterone anymore, and
mm,
I can assure you, whatever's going on in my body, it's completely inert, and it has been for 10 years. There is
yeah,
nothing going on.
yeah,
And you have testosterone, so you know the power that testosterone
yeah,
gives you, don't
yeah. Well, what I find, that's one thing, like in terms of biology and physiology, that people just don't understand, is that actually the human body can be male or female. And so, again, if people are uncomfortable with words, but a clitoris and a penis are actually the same tissue. Ovaries and testes, same tissue. And so, you have an embryo, it gets a shot of whatever, I think it's testosterone that kind of triggers, or not getting it, triggers what genitalia you have. And then at that moment, that's the only difference. And, so if your gametes develop into um, ovaries or testicles, then when you reach puberty, that's what gives off that particular hormone, and the human body responds to it. And that's the only, other than the actual genital area at that point, that's what changes. That's what the difference between men and women is, what hormones their bodies run on, which happens naturally by what organs they have. And if, for a trans person, if you override that, that's why transition can be so successful. And it's, that's a whole other debate, is that actually, we know that people that are trans are born like that. There's nothing, it's like your sexuality, there's absolutely nothing you can change about that, which is why people that aren't trans don't understand us. And really they should, because they cannot fathom wanting to be the opposite gender, because it's so fixed. That's the exact point. But for us, it's fixed the opposite, the wrong way. But we know that people are trans that are born like that, and the medical professionals that treat us, they evaluate us and they give us a diagnosis in one session. They know this. And so we've got the medical science to enable us to transition, but we've also got the medical science to stop the wrong puberty occurring in the first place, which is life changing. We've got all this, and yet they banned it in the UK. So, i.e., puberty blockers. So, to me, that would have stopped me growing breasts, so then I wouldn't have scars from a double mastectomy. I'd probably be a little bit taller. For trans women like yourself, you wouldn't be as tall, your voice wouldn't have broken, which doesn't unbreak, etc., etc. And it's just, we've got the capabilities to completely change people's lives with this. But why, for me, the key, the real thing is, why is this happening? Why is there so much? Like I say, the medical professionals know that trans is a real thing, that we're born like this. It's not something that we just develop or decide. And yet, who's making these decisions then? It's public opinion, and the public don't know about this. So it's a completely uneducated. Whenever I see all the hate online and you see what people are writing, it's clear in my head that it's come from a place of ignorance. And yet they've got the loudest voices, and then they fearmonger by saying, yeah, we can't have men in women's spaces because it sounds scary. And so people then go, yeah, they're right. And it's all just it's public pressure and then the politicians think, oh, if I go against that, there's going to be an uproar. So it's
But
it's a place of ignorance
just
that's
pick up on
causing
what you
all the
said there.
chaos.
The Cash report didn't ban puberty blockers. What the Cash
Yeah,
report said was it was unproven around the effects of puberty blockers and the development of children, young people who'd had puberty blockers into later life. And there was concerns that brain development and other developmental issues may occur as a result. There wasn't enough studies, which is tricky because there are not enough test cases because, in order to do proper clinical trials, you have to have a double blind,
yeah,
which means that some people have it, some people don't. And that's like conversion therapy is like,
yeah,
which child decide you're not going to help.
yeah,
So ethically, it's really tricky to have those studies. But the Cash report actually said that we need to set up proper studies and trials. It also said, and the medical professionals agree, anybody currently having cross-sex hormones as a young adult or puberty blockers as a young person should continue on that pathway.
yeah,
So these aren't dangerous drugs. We
no,
hear that dangerous drugs bandied around. These are hormones that our body produces naturally in terms of the hormones from the opposite sex or the opposite
yeah,
biology.
yeah,
The puberty blockers are inhibiting those pathways. It's not like taking a COVID jab. This is just blocking
yeah,
bodily functions. It's stopping you doing things. If they were dangerous, countries around the world wouldn't be prescribing them.
yeah.
They would stop
They're
them
used not
immediately.
for non-trans people as well, aren't
Yeah.
they? So
And for precocious puberty, they're still
yeah,
prescribing them
exactly.
for children as
Yeah,
young as 8 or 9 years old,
yeah,
still prescribing them for those reasons, because that's seen legally acceptable.
mhm,
So these aren't dangerous drugs.
no,
But I agree with the Cash report. I'm not here to say I don't agree with it. I agree that proper trials are needed. We need proper evidence. The Cash report also said that there should be better support for people who are detransitioning. And I completely agree. It's not for everybody. If you've made a mistake, you realize it's not for you, your brain becomes clear, or as many have experienced, societal pressure means
yeah.
you're between a rock and a hard
I was going
place,
to
and some
say
people go backwards because they can't
most
function.
I would say probably I wouldn't have to say 100% because I don't know, but I would guarantee you that 99.999% of anybody that detransitions, it's not because transition wasn't right, it's because they've struggled with how society treats them. So in that respect, their life has now become more problematic because they can't access a toilet or because people say mean it's not the transition, it's public again, and it's ignorance, and it makes their life so bad that they can't deal with it and decide, no, that wasn't for me. And that's terrible. That's terrible.
What you're saying there is
Because would
life
help
doesn't
that.
become magical and easier because you transition, does it?
No,
It's not some magical
no,
party we embark on this,
no,
yay, fabulous, we're gonna have a great time. Doesn't happen, does it?
no. Well, it can do. Obviously, we can
Euphoria.
make
All right, trans
ourselves,
euphoria.
yeah,
Yeah.
and and it shouldn't rely on passing. So say I'm lucky that I pass, but it not every single trans person wants to take all steps. If you're non-binary, not everybody can pass. To me, the whole point is I was so scared of doing this and thinking the only thing I really needed was my voice to break. Yeah, I wanted facial hair and everything else, but I would pass if my voice broke, and that's what I was scared of. But why should I be scared of that? Because actually, as I say, I've got scars across my chest, which I'd rather not have, but that is a million times better than the chest I had before, when I was so dysphoric that I would wear a big baggy jumper in summer because I didn't like the fact that people could see that I had breasts. And so at the moment, yeah, life is better. So if you don't pass, but it means you can wear the clothes that you want, you can be called the be used, have the pronoun used for you that you want, and your name, etc. Go and do the jobs you want. If you can live your life as you, it really doesn't matter. And I think a lot of people may not feel the need to take hormones or have surgery, because actually if they can just be themselves and improve their life and do the things that they feel they want to without this pressure from society of having to pass, then it wouldn't be so important. It's just it's a public and an ignorance that causes us lots of issues.
How easy was it for you to transition? You said yourself you've had
Mm.
top surgery, you've taken hormones. Did you just rack up one day and say, chop them off and stick it in me? Did that happen?
More or less. I was very lucky because it doesn't normally, does it? So 10 years ago, as you'll know, the waiting times, now people wait years and years. Literally, they come up to 5, 6 years just to get a first appointment. And this is something that, it's easily correctable. We've got the technology and, the medical science to do this. So it shouldn't, one diagnosis, it shouldn't take this long. But anyway, back then, I had well, I started privately, and so I went to a gender clinic in London. But when I transferred across, the waiting times, I had a bit of inside information on trans forums as to which were the shortest. So I requested to go to a certain gender clinic. The waiting time was 8 weeks to get a first appointment. So anyway, the biggest thing for me was I I wanted to research this and make sure that hormones were safe, which they were, that I weren't going to cause me to have medical issues, that hormones were safe, and that I could do this, and just had some questions. So I went and had some counselling. Amazing counsellor, changed my mind literally in my first session. And then by the time I'd made my mind up and I went to an FTM London, which is the support group in London for FTM, that's female to male for those listening, and got all my questions answered. I actually had gender specialists there on my first visit, so I was able to answer my questions. I changed my name the next day. That was in September 2013, and then I went and started hormones in October, literally a month later, which was my next appointment, because I'd already jumped through the few hoops from sort of July. And then my next appointment after that was to discuss my top surgery. So I got my all clear for that. And in fact, that was the point I was changing over to NHS. And I didn't want that 8 weeks to come too quickly, because then I couldn't have carried on the private path once I was under NHS. And then I would have had to wait and get the next. So that would have slowed me down. And I actually declined my first gender appointment with the NHS because I didn't want to then get caught up in that little transitional period. So then I booked my chest surgery. I went to America, and, so within 6 months, the two main things that I needed to do, I was passing on hormones and my chest surgery, because that's the biggest thing the public can see, were done. Amazing. Which then meant I can live my life. Because this is the other thing I think that's really, really bad about the fact that it can take 10 years or more to transition on the NHS. For teenagers that are wanting to do this or needing to do this, their lives are on hold. Literally, it is an absolutely massive, massive thing to go through this process and to never know, what's going to happen. They're starting college, they're meeting new people, they're not on hormones yet, which means all these people are now meeting them, and they're going to have to out themselves as they transition. And then they're trying to find their way in life, what peers they're going to, where do they sit with their peers, etc. What sort of group and social groups do they fit in with? They don't know yet, because they're living a lie. They're living the wrong gender. And this is a really, really important and influential period for any human being, especially as an adolescent. And yet for a trans person, we're sitting in limbo, we're living the wrong life, we're having to out ourselves, and we're having to wait a decade till we're 30 or so before we can finish transition. How harmful is that for a human being, when actually we could go get our hormones, start passing, bind or whatever, and whatever trans women need to do to pass, and then transition quickly, get on with our lives, and just live a normal life. It's ludicrous.
Do you think
Little
part of
rant
the
there.
problem
Sorry.
is that being trans is seen as being broken? because there's so much
Yeah,
stigma around it. It's being
yeah,
broken in the same way that, you wind the clock back 30, 40 years. If someone came out as gay, it would be, "Oh my God,
yeah,
what are you doing to our family? Well,
yeah,
am I never gonna have grandkids? Am I gonna have this?" All of a sudden, there's
yeah,
family stigma, and so I was even accused the other day of being trans was easier than being gay. It's like, "Oh, you're turning kids trans, so they don't have to be gay." It's like
yeah. Well,
ridiculous. I
I'm a
almost
gay
swore there, you know?
man, so why that
Yeah,
it does,
it's
sexuality, as you know, is completely separate.
yeah,
And I certainly, pre-transition, I was straight. Now I'm seen as a gay person.
yeah.
So I
And
certainly
so
didn't
people wanna
transition to be straight.
stop us because it's broken. It goes counter to biology, you know?
Yeah,
I think, "Well, hang on a minute. If we're basing it on pure biology, Adam and Eve stuff here, then if you're born with one of these and or not one of those, that's meant to go together, you know. But biology says that doesn't work, and biology says that doesn't work. So
yeah,
the whole biological argument is complete codswallop as far as I'm concerned, because we fully accept that people can be same sex attracted, opposite sex attracted, they can be polyamorous, they can be bi, they can be pan, they can be whatever they
yeah,
want.
yeah,
But since you say, "Well, I'm trans," "Oh, that's not normal. That's not okay."
yeah,
So hang on a minute, what is okay? We're creating rules and adapting them depending on who the audience is or what our agenda is, and think,
yeah.
hang on a minute, does it? At what point am I broken? And you're making me a threat. It's
Yeah, I think the
ludicrous,
fact that
ludicrous.
gender is so fixed is why people don't get it. I've said that
Hmm.
a little bit sooner, and it's the exact reason they should get it. Because if everybody, if 50% of people suddenly went, "Oh, I feel a bit male today. Oh no, tomorrow I feel a bit more female." The whole point is that yeah, we get non-diverse people, non-binary people that do, or fluid, that change from day to day. But the majority of the human race, their gender is fixed, and so they'll never ever wake up one day and go, "Actually, I fancy being this." And that is the whole point, because for us, there's a mismatch there, and that will never change. It's not unreal. It's 100% there. And there's not, like you say, there's nothing broken. I also find it quite fascinating where people always go, "Yeah, but you'll never, to me, you'll never be a real man," or "For you, you'll never be a real woman," because what, it depends what your definition is. Because actually, I think the most important thing is who we are. If we lose a limb, we're not any less of a person. It's not about physicalities. Who we are is up here, and you were always female and I was always male. So yeah, we are what we are. But when they talk about biology and chromosomes, you'll never change your chromosomes. I'm not trying to change my chromosomes. When I walk down the road, people see me, they think, "Dude, that's it." You can't change that. But also, it doesn't matter who we are, what we are. I think you wouldn't say that to someone that has a prosthetic limb and say, "But why are you bothering? Why wear that limb? It's never going to be a real leg. We can see it's not a real leg. It's made of metal or plastic, or whatever they make prosthetic limbs out of." But the whole point is, for that person, that enables them to live a life and live a better life, because they can now walk down the road. And it's the same for us. We take our hormones, we do what we need to do to feel comfortable, and it enables us to live our lives. I'm not claiming that my DNA has changed, but I now feel comfortable. I'm not doing anybody else any harm. I'm not a bad person. And all I want to do is pee occasionally and not have an issue with it. I just
Well,
don't get
and
it.
go to the gym
Yeah.
and work out and do other things
Yeah.
and be treated like a man.
Yeah.
And
But do you know the other mad thing with this ruling? There's lots of things, as you know, that it just doesn't make sense. But now, if I'm treated for the sake of the Equalities Act as a female, biologically female, not only does that say as a trans person, how can they say I've still got rights? Because if I'm not a man, not seen as a man, I don't have any rights as a trans man. But um, as a gay man, all my gay rights have now gone. So I think there's other ways you could approach that if you were discriminated against, but it's nowhere near as strong. So if I went to a hotel with my partner, it's illegal for them to go, "No, we can't give you a room with one bed because we're not having that sort of thing in our hotel." That's discrimination. It's illegal. You could then take them to court and sue them over that. But for me now, if I try to take them to court over that, it my partner's but I'm biologically male, I'm biologically female. So for the sake of the Equalities Act, we're not a gay couple, so we can't take them. It's like,
But you could claim discrimination by perception, though, couldn't you? Because
yeah,
they
yeah,
believed you were a gay couple. So,
but it's not as
but
strong.
yeah,
It's not as strong.
no,
So
it's not direct discrimination. It's by perception, which
yeah,
is, as you say, not as strong.
yeah.
Um,
So, but there's just so
and it
many
makes a farce of it.
implications that have not been thought through with all of this ruling. They're just contradicting themselves completely. You know, the Gender Recognition Act does see us as our acquired gender, and
Well,
I think,
legally, we're two sexes, aren't we?
yeah,
Legally, we're
yeah,
our Equality Act sex
yeah,
and our legal sex for all
yeah,
purposes, apart from the Equality Act. So,
yeah.
and if
Oh
someone
my God.
challenges me for whatever reason, what do I say? Do they say, "Well, you're not a woman"? I go, "Well, do you want to define what you mean by
Yeah,
not a woman? In
yeah,
what context? Is it chromosomes? Is it Equality Act? Or is it legally?
yeah,
Or actually?" And I'm going, "Well, again, yeah, you want me to lie to you? You want me to tell you the truth? Which is the lie? What do you
mm,
mean?
yeah,
What's the purpose of the question? And if I tell you the answer, what are you going to do with that?" Yeah, again, my right of privacy, having a gender recognition certificate, I'm guaranteed the right of privacy. It's actually a criminal offence, not a, we were
yeah,
talking about toilets here.
yeah,
That's a civil offence. That's trespass.
yeah,
If we don't leave, disclosing our identity beyond your realm, disrespecting our privacy under Data Protection Act, under GDPR, under the Gender Recognition Act, is a criminal offence, and
yeah,
that the fines for that and imprisonment are quite hefty.
yeah,
So again, as an organisation, you're putting your people on the front line to be trusted with this information. Are they trained? Do they know what to do with
yeah,
it? What are you going to do with it? What are you going to hold? And then for those who have maybe studied the Equality Act, there's this proportionality and legitimacy. Does this situation, is it proportionate?
mm,
And just maintaining it as a single sex space isn't the whole story. Because
no,
that single sex space, when you have the intersection with the Gender Recognition Act and the protected characteristic of gender reassignment, there's an intersection there. So we have to be careful here that you're not just discriminating against someone saying it has to be a single sex space when it doesn't be. Okay. As a result of that, the law change, sorry, the clarification, it's not a law change, it's a
yeah,
clarification.
yeah.
As a result of that clarification,
For now,
it
anyway.
means the bar is a lot higher now for that.
Yeah,
It's a lot easier to prove it should be a single sex space.
yeah,
But that doesn't mean to say that it's not
yeah,
confusing, and there is
yeah,
clarity out there.
yeah. But I mean, also logistically, there's so many points we could discuss around how anything like that might work. So, you know, for example, how many trans people on this planet you just would never ever know that they were trans. So how do you enforce that? And if so, you know, how could you tell me that I'm going to cause any distress to anybody in a male toilet? It's just not. And yet, before hormones, I was the same person. But also, let's say I didn't pass. Why does that matter? That would just be discrimination on how someone looks. Again, how they look or whether they pass or don't doesn't make someone dangerous. It doesn't. So it just it doesn't work. So some places, I think they've actually retracted this. There was I can't remember which university it was. There was one university that posted
Warwick, I think it
only,
was
yeah,
Warwick.
yeah, Warwick, that was it, that said, yeah, and it didn't go into quite as much detail, which I'll come back to, as the updated guidance, but it just said toilet use is like biological and that's it. So technically, then if I went on their campus, they would not be able to remove me from the women's toilets, which would distress all the women in there. It doesn't work. Now the new guidance says that you cannot let someone of the opposite gender in, but it also says under some circumstances you can't go into your biological gender's space. Now, what they mean by that, it doesn't actually say this, but basically what they mean is, if for me, if I look too masculine, I now can't go in the women's. So I can't go in the men's, I can't go in the women's. And yet they're saying that incorrectly there's only two genders. I mean, to me, what I think of with this is there are only two genders, but there's a scale between them. That's where the non-binary comes in, and that's where the confusion comes in. But if they're saying that's it, you're either male or female, and you have to be categorized as either, they're then telling me I'm not either. So again, they're contradicting themselves. And how does that make me feel when all of a sudden I have no access whatsoever to any gendered split space? What am I? Not human. You know, I think gender neutral toilets would be the best way to go for absolutely everybody, because we don't need gendered toilets. You just need a cubicle. You go in just like we do at home, on a train, on a plane. It really doesn't matter in a restaurant when they've only got one toilet. It's not unsafe. It's not, there's no lack of dignity or privacy. So that would just completely solve the issue. But to me, what I then have an issue is they say, okay, now you can only use gender neutral or disability, facilities if they're there. But if there are gendered spaces, I am a gender, so you can't tell me I can't use that because you're diminishing who I am, and it's segregation. That's exactly the same, going back to the black and white argument of saying to someone, imagine putting a sign on toilets and these days saying whites only. Oh, but don't worry, if you're from a different country, you can use these toilets. We've got a separate
Or
space for you.
or if you look white, you're okay.
Yeah, yeah. Because actually, I've got a lot of black in me. My mum's from British Guyana, so she's a British citizen, was a British citizen. She's not with us any longer. But my granddad was actually very, very dark skinned, and my sisters, who are my half sisters, same mum, but their dad's black, are quite mixed race. So literally, my granddad, and he had very negroid features as well, and yet black. I believe the black gene is quite recessive, so it gets lost very quickly. So yeah, I've got a lot of black blood in me, but I look white.
But is that the problem we're talking about here? It's coming down to this old notion of passing privilege.
Yeah.
If you can, I mean, this is what people are trying their hardest to say. Well, actually, you should just self-serve and get out of there. It shouldn't be in our spaces. But
Mm.
I know that I'm safe if I pass. I
Yeah.
blend in society, and I know my voice is
And it
deep.
shouldn't need to be like that.
I've
Yeah.
got certain mannerisms that are probably more masculine than typical. But so
Doesn't
if I
matter.
go if I use
Yeah.
facilities, I don't talk. I worry
Yeah.
about coughing.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I remember you telling me about when
Yeah.
you're
Just
using the
the
toilet.
opposite. Yeah.
Yeah, that you have
Go on.
the
Let's have that
noise we
one.
make whilst using the toilet. We make different noises in the
Yeah.
toilet,
Yeah.
and I'm paranoid about the noises I make
Yeah.
when I'm peeing,
Yeah.
and you worry about the noises you make
Yeah.
when you pee
Yeah.
because it sounds different, doesn't it?
Yeah, but not just that. Let's say similar problems, but obviously because FTM and MTF are different journeys, like
Hmm.
what you were just saying. So let's say you pass visually and you go into a toilet and all's good, but then someone says something to you, you go, "Oh, sorry," because they bumped into you, and they hear what to them they perceive as a man's voice, then that outs you. Whereas for me, I had almost the opposite when I was pre-transition and having to only use female toilets, and I looked really masculine. People would stare at me and they'd kind of look and look up as if like to check if they were in the right place. Every now and again, someone would challenge me and say something, should you be in here, or are you in the right place, or you should be in, what are you doing, and whatever it is. And I'd say something, and as soon as I'd open my mouth, because obviously pre-testosterone, I had a female voice and it sounded better. They go, "Oh, sorry, sorry." So in fact, I was the opposite in that visually I looked male, but I sounded female, and it was almost like I wanted to say something. I can remember in judo, is I used to, in my club, everybody knew who I was, so I could go in, the ladies get changed, that was fine. Go to a competition, and I'd walk into the changing rooms and feel very uncomfortable because people, the majority of people, especially when I was younger, assumed I was male. So I remember that was the only time I hated my breasts, but I would go into the judo toilets, the changing areas, and I'd be like the first one taking my top off so they could see that I had breasts and was wearing a bra, because then people would, "Oh, you're in the right one." And it's just, what I find really fascinating is the amount of problems that I had pre-transition using the facilities that I was supposed to be using of my biological gender, when I wasn't trying to look male or female, I was just being me. And yet post-transition, all of that has gone away. So yeah, there's always going to be issues with toilets, like you said, worrying about what other people think. Are you going to be outed because of the sound of you peeing in a different way, or whatever it is? So it's not perfect. The anxiety is not gone, but it's 99.9% gone. Not once have I ever had anyone query that or say anything or look at me or stare at me. And that's me in a gents toilet. Whereas now the government, the EHRC are all saying you shouldn't use a gents toilet. It doesn't it really doesn't make sense.
Just to balance this out, just to show that we are thinking the whole 360 here. It's not just about us. There was a
Yeah.
recent report about police forces and changing to stop and search, and
Mm,
talking about the fact that you will be searched, strip searched, or stop and searched by a person of the same biological sex. And the headline sort of painted this look, shock horror. Trans people are now going to be searched by any trans women were searched by male officers, and deliberately polarizing headlines. And
mm,
what I want to do is dig beneath the surface of that and think, well, hang on a minute, there's rights for different people in here. And if you are a biological female, a cisgender female officer, then under the Equality Act, under employment law and regulations, it's not fair to demand that you strip search somebody of the opposite biological sex. Somebody, let's go back to
mm.
that penis word again. Yeah, is it fair to insist this biological female searches somebody with a penis? And I thought, well, hang on a minute, no, that's not fair. So when we think about fairness and the Equality Act here, we can't have demands on somebody who is protected by the characteristic of sex and forcing them to do something that is cross sex or cross the
Mm,
biology.
yeah,
So, which is why reading into the article a bit more detailed, the default position is overridden by, on request of the person being searched, on the permission of the person doing the searching,
yeah,
and by a senior officer. So I can say, hang on a minute, I don't have one of those. I don't want that person to touch me because I believe that would be a sexual assault. This person goes, okay. This person says, yes, I agree. And then what can happen can happen. So
yeah,
it's not saying there isn't a process.
yeah,
And because I'm not here to say I want to override anybody who has an anxiety or a need, or feels they have to be protected by single sex spaces for whatever that may be. That's not in, as a woman, I'm not here to do that. So what we got to try and do is find a way of, as you say, it's not pie, it's not a zero sum game.
mm,
How do we have a conversation? Say, actually, here's a problem, here's the scenario, and here's some solutions, rather than it being one way or the other way, and it's very binary. And that's
yeah.
going back to the Equality Act,
But they didn't listen to
proportionate
trans
and
people.
legitimate.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry, go on, go on.
yeah. It's about proportionality. It's about trying to find that space. So blanket bans or blanket policies
Yeah,
are where the problem comes. If you can sit and explain and say, look, this is the reason. It's unfair for our female police officers to be forced to search a male body. Let's use that phrase, male body person. I can understand that. That is something that we should
mm,
accommodate in society.
yeah,
Um, but we don't worry about a gay male police officer or a gay female police officer searching somebody.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
we don't get hung up about that. I remember having
yeah,
conversation with schools in the past. They were really worried about a young trans pupil sharing a bunk with a non-trans person. And I said, well, what if the other person's gay? What you're not
yeah,
worried about that?
yeah,
And they go, well, no, I'm only worried about what I can
yeah.
see, the transiness. I'm not
But
worried about the gayness. Ah,
years ago, they would have been worried about the
mm,
gayness,
yeah,
whereas now they it's just moved on to the next minority group of people. So
yeah,
hopefully in another 50, 100 years, they'll look back at these conversations we're having now and be like, but that's mad. Why would you worry about the person being trans? It's
yeah.
just yeah.
I mean, again, I was talking to someone the other day from another police force who came to me because they're confused. Um, yeah, this clarity has created a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
Um, and one thing they pointed out was they are getting inundated with freedom of information requests
Yeah.
targeted at their senior officers throughout the force. You'll find that other organizations, other bodies are being bombarded with freedom of information requests. What's your policy? What's this? What's that? What's that?
Mm,
And you look at other well-known chains, gyms, whatever, are being bombarded by people with an agenda to try and force trans people into the shadows, out of the mainstream,
yeah.
in it's the guise of protecting female safety.
Mm,
And if it was only that simple, because as we
yeah.
talked about here, is it's not about protecting female safety.
No.
It's about trans exclusion
Yeah.
under that guise. Yeah, we are broken. We are abnormal. We're a fetish. We're this all these tropes: a threat, a danger, cheats, usurpers, pretenders, all these
Yeah.
kind of words that get thrown at us. That's what it's trying to. Yeah, people are not doing it solely for the reasons of protecting women. Because if they were, we'd be going after Andrew Tate, we'd be going after other people, we'd be going
Yeah.
after misogynistic, we'd be going after police officers,
Yeah.
we'd be going after Lucy Letby's
Yeah.
who murdered children
Not
in
all police
hospitals.
officers, obviously. Just
Yeah, no, not all police
the
officers, not
ones
not all
that
nurses, not all people, not
abuse
all.
that power. Yeah.
There are
Yeah.
bad actors, and there
Yeah.
are bad actors. Just because you're trans doesn't mean say you're an angel or perfect. There are many trans people who are bad actors as well, but not every individual in this country could be tarred
Yeah.
with a bad actor brush because one
It's
person
like,
in that stereotype is.
wasn't there? I don't know if I can't remember the details around this, but wasn't there one of the American school shootings was a trans person?
Could have been. Could
I
have been.
can't remember whether that was actually just there was some whisperings around that. I don't know if it was true or not, but let's say that happened. If a trans person went in and did that, everybody would go, look, see, trans people are dangerous. And yet they don't, when it's a cis person, they don't go, oh, look, every cis person has the potential to, it's got nothing to do with whether you're trans or not. And yet anything like that happens. So if someone was sexually assaulted by a trans person, everybody would just go, see, and think that all trans people are like that. And that's discrimination. It's terrible. It's just, yeah.
Well, we've been yakking on for nearly an hour, so there's been a couple of questions popping up on LinkedIn, and
Oh,
so we've got a
okay.
few minutes. If you are on LinkedIn, you can drop them in there. One of the questions was, do you think things are going to change? Do you think what's going to happen with the Supreme Court ruling? Is Parliament going to kick in? What do you think is going to happen?
That's a really difficult question. I think it could go two ways, obviously. But what I always think, people used to say to me, do I think things are going backwards? With like the first election of Trump, and it felt like everyone's going backwards. And I used to say, well, no, that's actually part of the process. We need to move forward, because as we talk about these things, more people are going to come up, more people are going to be vocal. And so some of that will be moving us backwards, but it's part of the journey of moving forward. What I didn't realize is how far backwards we need to travel. And like our rights going back before the Gender Recognition Act being diminished, so that's over 20 years ago now, 21 years ago that came in. I had no clue that it would be that big, and I think it's going to take a long time to possibly get where we need to with it. But I do think if that was what's needed to bring this up, to have these discussions, to then eventually figure out what is the right thing, then that's part of the process. So I think, yeah, eventually it will. And it could be quite quick. It could be within a few years when we've had these discussions. And the Good Law Project have as people that don't know, they've done that pre-action letter because they want to take people to court and the government to court and actually correct this. If that goes ahead, then actually all of this Supreme Court ruling was the catalyst to actually take those steps forward. So we could end up with them going, no, actually, you can't discriminate against trans people. And that they actually make it illegal to kick us out, to kick me out of a gents and you out of a woman's. So I could see it going that way in the next few years. But there's so much misunderstanding that I could see it going the other way and actually saying, yeah, you need to exclude me from male spaces becoming law. I could see it being one or the other. But I think eventually, whether that's in 5, 10, 15 years, yeah, it's going to go the right way. It's just when and how long.
Do people really care? I mean, if you stick a microphone in someone's face and
Most
say,
people don't.
"Can a woman have a penis?" They're going to go, "Ah, we've seen it in politicians."
Yeah.
But does the average person really care unless
Most
they're
of them
asked the
don't.
question?
Yeah. And if they do, it's like I say, it comes from a place of ignorance, a place of hatred, discrimination, or they've been like blindfolded into this is, we can't have men in women's sports or women's spaces. And so to them, it's an argument that seems to make sense, whereas actually if they knew about it, it doesn't make any sense. So yeah, the majority of people, and so many people go, I don't care, just use the toilet you want to. But we've got so many haters and the kind of the people that are against us that are mounting this challenge. They're so loud and vocal about it that it's a minority, but they're getting their way because they're shouting the loudest.
Matt, it's been a fantastic conversation yet again. If anyone is listening, please share the live stream on either on LinkedIn or on YouTube. It's held there. You can share that. You can rewatch it. If you are putting comments in the chat, I will keep looking and monitoring them and try and reply as when I can. Matt, maybe we'll do another one of
No,
these.
thank
And
you. Yes.
if anyone's listening and you'd like to, we could bring you on as a guest. If you want to come in as a guest next time, we can
Yeah.
have you in the green room and bring you on. Or if you want to have your own show, reach out to me. Love to have you, and we could do something. But I want to try and do these every couple of times a month, once a month, whenever we can, just to try and educate, to tell real, true life stories, the real impact. This is not a faceless debate. This is real people, real lives. My mum, my daughter, my family, my brother, my sister, everybody in my life is affected by what's going on in the world. And it's like you have a birth certificate that says boy on it. I have a birth certificate that says girl on it. Now what? Thank you.
Good question.